The Toronto Dominion Bank, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, the Bank of Montreal. These Canadian banks have earned a reputation for being some of the most solid financial institutions in the world. Unlike America's top banks, the Canadian banks did not delve in subprime mania and did not devour those deadly toxic assets. No Canadian banks have asked or received government bailouts. While their profits are down, they are still making money. Canadian bank stock values have been hit, but have not vaporized like some American financial institutions. Mr. Minister, why have the Canadian banks worked and the American banks have basically failed?
The Canadian banking system sometimes has been viewed as boring, but boring's become the new sexy in banking systems. There are several reasons for that. I mean, one is that there's a relatively conservative or fiscally conservative culture in our banking system. Secondly, we don't have small banks. We have 5 or 6 large banks, and we do regulate, apply the regulations for the regulations to be effective.
And regulate they do. Canadian banks are not allowed to issue those 100% mortgages that were available and so damaging in the United States. American financial institutions were issuing mortgages, loans, and securities at a rate of $30, even $40 for every dollar they had in deposits. Canadian regulations forbid banks from lending out more than $7 for every dollar held in reserves. In short, Canada has been risk-averse, the U.S. risk-prone. And you see the difference. Home and apartment values have dropped about 14% in Canada, but nowhere at the 30% plus levels evident in many American cities. While classic condo projects have shut down, there are very few foreclosures. Do you think the United States is going to learn from the Canadian model of regulation?
President Obama has talked about Canada's system being one to look at as a model. I've had that discussion with Larry Summers as well, and I was Secretary with Tim Geithner. These are important discussions to have because we do have stability in the system and we have a growing economy in normal times.
But these are not normal times, even in fiscal conservative Canada. Canadians are losing jobs, finding it harder to get loans, and they put much of the blame on their neighbor, the United States.
Canadians are down on the Americans right now. It's not only the financial aspects. 2 of the biggest export markets in Canada are cars. 90% of the cars that are made in Canada are destined for exports in the United States. The sales have fallen 50%. And you sure are tempted as a Canadian to go back and say, what were you thinking about in the United States over that period leading up to the last couple of years? Like, why did the banks do that behavior? Why did the households do that behavior? Why didn't the regulators step in? You do
These protesters are asking even tougher questions. Why do they have to pay for America's economic mistakes? And why is their government not protecting them? The Canadian auto workers' unions are livid. With the meltdown in the American auto industry, they fear the ripple effect will destroy their pensions. They are protesting outside the provincial Ontario legislature because the government is going back on a key promise to ensure their pension benefits.
And our government is not here when we need them. There's something wrong with that. Why did we put them in office? Shame on them!
Ontario says that private auto manufacturing pensions are so badly underfunded that the province doesn't have the billions of dollars needed to cover the shortfall. Trish McAuliffe took part in the protest.
Personally, I feel really betrayed. I feel that, for an auto industry that's contributed so greatly to the economy, to Ontario, to the Canadian fabric of society, it's so wrong. When I went to work for General Motors, I sold my soul.
Trish has just lost her assembly line job at the Oshawa General Motors plant. She has put in 26 years. But even her partial pension is now under threat. Trish's husband, Jim, also lost his GM job after 24 years on the assembly line.
Put that on the table for me, please.
They still have a mortgage and 2 teenage sons approaching college and tuition.
I mean, I know a lot of what goes on in the United States affects us as Canadians, but at the end of the day, the Canadian government has to step up and take care of Canadian people. One question I would like to ask these government officials, is their pension funds underfunded? I'm sure it's not. Why should ours be? They've done nothing to protect Canadian jobs. Yeah, you know what? There's free trade, but it's not necessarily fair trade.
In the meantime, Jim and his unemployed friends take the kids to a local hockey game.
I'm not sitting in the middle.
They work hard at keeping life normal while hoping for better times. According to Canadian financial specialists, they may not have to wait too long. It depends on the big neighbor to the south, the United States.
We are still fortunate in Canada. We are geographically right next door to the largest, wealthiest market in the world, and we have reaped enormous benefits from it over the time. And yeah, there's payback time, and we're unfortunately in those right now, but it still is our key export market. Just wish they hadn't have got into this mess.
For World Focus, this is Martin Himmel in Toronto.